welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD. You want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Friday, June 28th. We'll be taking a look at tomorrow's UFC 303 card and the slate on DraftKings. 13 fights as of now. They're going to be going through some weigh-ins, especially with a lot of the fights being added to the card last minute. Let's hope everyone makes weight properly. We'll see. We'll check it out. Hopefully we stick to 13 fights. Right? The more fights, the better. Less duplication. So hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door. Give me those thumbs. You know how much I like those. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Remember, later today, Grinders Live crunch time for all your MLB needs. That's about 5 o'clock Eastern. Tune into the channel then. Joining me right now, it's John Breslin, Squirrel Patrol. UFC 303, which is, if we told a month ago, half the names on the card wouldn't be on the card because everything's gotten moved around. But I think this may be a good one for DFS. I would predict that there's a more likelihood that maybe we do get a solo winner of the large field contest, at least more so than some past cards.
Yeah, so it was supposed to be the McGregor fight. McGregor was supposed to be coming back. I guess he's got a broken toe. We don't know exactly what's going on. So McGregor is off the card, and so they kind of packed this one together with whatever they could. But it's really interesting for DFS. There's some really interesting stuff going on with the pricing, with the way the odds have changed. We've got a $9,800 fighter. I can't remember seeing that. And so Peyton Talbot is, I think, going to end as the strongest favorite in UFC history, or it's at least going to be close between him and some of the Bo Nickel. I think Bo Nickel's first fight or something. But even on that card, Bo Nickel was not 9,800. Peyton Talbot's 9,800, and there's a $500 gap between him and the rest of the fighters, and that makes some interesting things to do with your lineups. You've got some really strong win equity for the price on some fighters. So it's going to be a really interesting DFS card. And it's good. It's good to have pay-per-view pricing and prize pools back in our lives.
Okay, so let's first talk about, obviously, contextual variables of the slate. Okay, we got 13 fights. We're looking for what is the optimal lineup, the best possible lineup look like? More likely, less likely, especially for large field contests. We always look at the number of fights and the spreads of the fights. So we got 13 fights, okay, which is towards the larger side. So focusing on finishing equity may be more prominent than just plain winning the fight. And then also the spreads of the fight. We got two fairly big favorites, but obviously you said Peyton Talbot is 9,800. Which means, the more huge favorites you have in a card, the more likely that the optimal lineup is going to be closer to 50K than it is, when you leave 2K on the table. But let's talk about the main event first. We got one 5-round fight. We got Alex Pereira, 8,500. We got Yuri Prohaska, 7,700. Good inside the distance lines for a 5-round fight. It's a mid-range, mid-priced. It's, a 60-40 on the money line. Me personally, Alex Pereira's fighting style tends to lead me to being underweight him most of the time. But when you're in the mid 8Ks, a second round knockout still is a serviceable and possibly optimal score. Obviously, Yuri has a more grappling upside if he chooses to use it. If this fight goes 5 rounds, I think Yuri is more likely to score better than Alex Pereira. But it's a 5-round fight. We have a lot of these mid-range fight. I think the key to this slate is someone in the mid-range with these pick-em-ish type of lines may do really well, and you have to figure out which guy it is. John, do you think, is this a slate where you're more likely or less likely? Are you be overweight or underweight the main event? Because you know me, I'm typically under on the main event because it tends to be overowned. I personally think this slate, the ownership is a little too high, but I can't just ignore this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a great main event to target for DFS. It should be an exciting one, but it's kind of just another fight on the card. I think it's like heavily favored to end under 2.5 rounds. So like we don't necessarily get anything out of it, out of the fact that it's a 5 round main event. But we could get something if it ends in the first round, right? Like it's still it's kind of just another fight on the card, but actually of the fights on the card, it's probably a decent one to target. So I'm not a hater on it. Like the ones that I really don't like are the big slow, heavyweights, slow paced fighters who don't have like that great chance of like ending it even in the first round. It should be like a good main event to watch, probably a better one to watch than to put into your DFS lineups. I've been kind of on the same thought process that you are for a few fights now that Alex Pereira in these main events just isn't a great fighter to target. But he's had 2 fights in a row now, which put up pretty high scores, like 97 or above. So he's kind of like killed off that that thought process. But I'm probably going back to the same thought process. Like I think Yuri's a better play than Alex Pereira, but I think the ownership's going to reflect that. I'll probably just be a tad under the field on both of these fighters.
And obviously, to break down the main event from a fight perspective, you could always listen to the Ground and Pound podcast, which will be coming out today if you're a RotoGrinders premium member. So sign up today. You get all the MMA, all the MLB, all the PGA. You get all the everything. You get our lineup HQ. You get our sim labs. You get our, all of our research tools for all the sports, all of our projections, all of our ownership. So click on that link in the description. Get $40 off your first month. So sign up today. You mentioned before, we got a $9,800 fighter. We always talk about the expensive fighters, right? The really, especially the top end. Peyton Talbot's minus 1,800. That's the money line. Minus 250 inside the distance. Plus 200 in the first round. 9,800. And like you said, like we only have 4 9K fighters on this slate. And Talbot's 90. It's not like it's 98, 97, 96. It's 98 and then 93 and then 91 and then 9K. We talk about it on the show often, when our sims come out, either later today or early tomorrow morning. Peyton Talbot probably has the highest probability of scoring 100 points, but may have the lower probability out of all of these guys of making the optimal lineup. So we have his ownership around in the low 30s. I'm going to assume, John, that you're going to be under that because typically your attitude is that at 9,800 especially, like it's really you need like the perfect outcome for a guy like that to score enough points where like Peyton Talbot could wrestle, win in the first round, get 114 points, and still miss the optimal lineup. And if that's the scenario, I don't know. Do you want to be under on him?
I don't know. This is one of the most interesting UFC questions I think we've had like this year, maybe over the past like couple of years. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do here. I hypothetically, right, as a matter of theory, I want to say I hate 98. I hate the idea of playing a $9,800 fighter because he makes the chances of you getting like 5 other winners in your lineup so small. But I'm just surprised at the quality of the lineups I could put together, putting a $9,800 fighter into my lineups. I think one of the things that's going on is that really the question of do you want to play Peyton Talbot is a question of how many underdogs do you think are going to win on this card? And it's not even that much of a question of do you like Peyton Talbot or not. He's a fighter that can put up a high score, but isn't necessarily guaranteed. Like he could go out there and put up a 75-point win at $9,800, and that is probably awful for your lineup. But he could get a first round win. It's not impossible. He could have a high scoring 3-round win too. So I feel like everything's on the table. It's a really tough question. I don't know. I think we've had some questions about what his ownership should be. Kind of in the discussions, like internal discussions with RotoGrinders. I don't know what his ownership is going to be. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be over or under 33%. I want to say that it's going to be lower because everyone's going to be like looking at sim results and saying like, oh, it's like once you put a $9,800 fighter in, it's going to be so difficult to like fill out the rest of your lineup. But it's not that difficult to fill out the rest of your lineup. Like you can put in because you don't have the 97, the 96, the 95, 94, $9,200 fighters. So the opportunity cost of putting in a $9,800 fighter isn't as high as it usually is. And so I don't know. I think it could be under 33%. I'm not sure it will be. I probably will be under 33%, but I had looked at this question and thought, oh, I might exclude him entirely. I don't think I will. One thing I might do is if I'm playing Peyton. This is a weird thing. If I'm playing Peyton Talbot, I might not play Macy Chiasson, which is like a weird way. You would think that would be totally unrelated, but I don't think it is because Macy Chiasson has such good win equity at 7,400. I might make an exclusion rule there, which I don't normally do with fighters. But just to try to get, I think if I'm playing Peyton Talbot, I want to get a little bit different with the rest of my lineup, even though he's not necessarily going to see that high of ownership.
Well, it's a combinatoric issue. It's an issue that most lineups that will have Peyton Talbot will it will share a lot of Macy Chiasson, and then you have the combination of 4 fighters for a certain salary that isn't able to even fit in another 9K fighter. That it looks like it's like, well, if I play Michael Page and then if I play Anthony Smith, it's like no, those combinations will probably be like 10 or 15 time dupe also. So you're much better off just hoping that the value dies in the underdog range, and you get someone that's like at least half as owned and less duplicated. So that makes complete sense. I think in small field contests, you're playing the 555, or the single, anything that's under 1,000 entries. I think Peyton Talbot is way more viable in those because you don't need the optimal lineup in those contests as much as you do in the large field stuff. So I always want to point out that, we're talking primarily the large field contests when analyzing stuff on the show for the optimal lineup. But in the small field stuff, I mean, dude, you could win a small field contest even with a losing fighter. I mean, even with a losing favored fighter in your lineup, depending on the ownership of everything. But the other 9K fighters on the slate, we have Ray Saruya, minus 475 favorite, minus 175 inside the distance. Martin Boudet takes on Arlovsky, minus 255. And Joe Pyfer takes on Marc-Andre Barriot, and he's minus 280 favorite and plus 100 inside the distance. Would it be a hot take? I don't think it would be a hot take. Why play Peyton Talbot at 9,800 when you could play a wrestler, Ray Saruya, who on any other slate, if he was like the highest price, if we took Peyton Talbot off the slate, you'd be like, well, obviously you play Saruya minus 175 inside the distance. Probably a grapple heavy win. Carlos Hernandez, it's not like the most awful of fighters, but I mean, these are the light guys. These are like, this is 125, 135. I mean, Hernandez probably, he's a boxer that has no power. So seems like a good spot for Ray Saruya, put up a ton of points, even in a decision. Why not just save the 500 and just start all your lineups with Saruya?
I do think for cash games, yeah, I think so. Like, just in terms, I see a question in the chat about cash game plays. Like, I think the cash game plays, like the top spend up is probably Saruya, and I think, and you're probably pairing him with like Macy Chiasson just for the win equity. I think that I think Saruya is going to see higher ownership, and we've got that projected. And there is a thought in my head that I think maybe if the Peyton Talbot ownership's a little bit lower, a lot of it's probably going to Saruya. And that could get lopsided. Like that could get like accentuated to the point where Saruya's ownership just too high. I think we're showing it about 41%. I think it could be higher. But I think everyone's gonna see that same question, and I think Sims are gonna see that question of well, you're not losing that much win equity. I think Talbot's got about a 90% chance of winning his fight. Which, may end up being the highest, strongest favorite in UFC history. But Soria's got a 78% chance of winning his fight, just according to the probability of the Vegas odds. So that's not a huge drop off, but $500 is a lot. $500 buys you a lot. So I think that a lot of people are. I think for cash games, I think that's what you want to do. And I think for tournaments, a lot of people are going to see that and go, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that too. And then you could get this lopsided ownership.
Then we got Joe Pyfer 9,000. Martin Boudet, Joe Pyfer plus 100 inside the distance. Martin Boudet plus 140 inside the distance, facing 45-year-old Andrei Arlovsky, who he was going on a little bit of a resurgence, maybe 2 years ago, getting some, I don't think he won against Collier, but whatever. Typically, Arlovsky's not a guy that fights that you target, and Boudet is not a fighter that scores well. But out of this group, if Boudet's going to be 14% owned, the inside the distance line makes it seem like just as competitive as any of these other fighters in this range. It's just that it's a heavyweight fight with a guy that typically just pushes you against the cage, doesn't, maybe gets a takedown. I like the ownership on Boudet, but it's almost one of these things where if you didn't watch the fights, I'd be more inclined to play more Boudet because I just look at the numbers and go, well, why aren't I playing the guy that? Why is Pyfer 2.5 times more owned than Boudet? Why is Saruya 3 times more owned than Boudet? But I've watched Martin Boudet fight, and this is essentially a low-level heavyweight fight between two guys that don't knock anyone out. So, can you make the case that we should be? You look right below these guys. Ricky Simone at 8,900. We've seen him. He averages 4 takedowns per 15. So obviously he's going to be owned at 30-ish% also. If I'm not playing Macy Chiasson in my lineup, I don't mind playing Simone or Pyfer, but we'll get to why we're talking about Macy Chiasson all the time. But what are your thoughts on this range, Boudet, Pyfer, Simone?
So yeah, Boudet's got low ownership, and there is I see that 14%, and I'm ooh, I don't know, I like it, and I may end up being over the field, but not by much. Boudet's chances of ending up on the winning lineup are he gets a first round finish, which is possible against Arlovsky. But after that, I'm not interested in the fight at all. And Arlovsky is a fight of 7,100. I want to go, any kind of win, he could probably get there. He should be way higher owned. He's got him 11. He's got a 30% chance of winning his fight. But I don't know. He could get Arlovsky even in a win, which is unlikely to happen. He could get outscored by a losing fighter. So I don't know what he gets you. And then if you start having multiple underdogs win, then Arlovsky, even in a win, gets the potential of not landing on the winning lineup. So this is probably the Arlovsky Boudet fight is probably the fight I'm least interested in. That's a question on the expert survey, but I'm already mapping out in my head. But Pyfer and Simone, Ricky Simone, I'm definitely interested in. And I think particularly the Oliveira Simone fight, I'm interested in both sides. That's the fight that's most likely to get canceled after lock, because that's the fighter. It's the fight that I'm most interested in targeting heavily and just seeing, after the first fight of the night, which of my lineups am I still following? Because I think that should be a high-paced fight. I think both fighters can score well in a win. Oliveira had that highlight reel, probably knockout of the year in his last fight. And yeah, Joe Pyfer has pretty good first round win odds, pretty good inside the distance odds, and he's a fighter that puts up high scores in his wins. So definitely interested in in rostering him, and he's $100 cheaper than Boudet. Like it's going to be difficult to like look at those two fighters and think I need to spend the extra 100 for Boudet. Maybe people end up doing that if they're hand building and they have the $100. Like, oh, this guy must be better. I don't think that happens all that frequently anymore, but like I hope it happens as much as possible. Yeah, so I'm definitely interested probably in Simone the most out of this like $9,100 to $8,900 range, then Pfeiffer, then Boudet.
Okay, let's stop beating around the bush. Macy Chiasson, 7,400. Okay, why do we keep on talking about Macy Chiasson, right? Well, Myra Bueno Silva, 8,800. Macy Chiasson, 7,400. This fight is essentially a pick'em now. I mean, I see on offshore, Myra Bueno Silva, minus 115. Macy Chiasson, minus 105. If this slate was repriced by DK now instead of a week and a half ago, this would be the $8,200, $8,000 fight. The difference is that it's the $8,800, $7,400 fight. So in technicality, based on win odds, based on odds value, Myra Bueno Silva is 600 too expensive, and Chiasson is 600 underpriced. And also Macy Chiasson, when she wins, typically wins with a decent score because she's more likely to land takedowns and win in that regard. She's going to be mega owned as a $7,400 priced underdog, like 40+%. What are your thoughts? It's a 13 fight card. So think in these terms. You play Macy Chiasson. Are you thinking from an optimal lineup perspective, is there a case to be made that, well, she loses half the time. So if she loses half the time she's not going to be on the optimal lineup, probably, right? Let's all the favorites win and she's the highest scoring underdog or something like that. But there's also scenarios where Chiasson wins and still doesn't make the optimal, just like you mentioned before with Arlovsky. Now, I think it's a little less than, like, if Arlovsky wins a decision, he scores like 42 points. I mean, like we all know, like the decision win from Arlovsky is not going to score well, but a decision win from Chiasson could possibly score better than that. I'm much more likely to be under this number, this 47 number, just due to the fact that, like, it's not like one of these scenarios where we get on the slate where the 74, like it was an $8,800, $7,400 fight, and the $8,800 fighter pulled out, and it was replaced by another late replacement who's now priced at $6,600, and the $7,400 person is a minus 400 favorite now. So you're getting essentially a guy that should be 9,400 at 7,400. Like, Myra Bueno Silva is still the favorite in this fight. Bueno Silva could just win, and then all the Chiasson lineups, it doesn't matter anymore, right?
Yeah, the first thing I did when I looked at this fight was I checked to see like who was Macy Chiasson supposed to fight originally, right? Like, because the line is that of one of these like late replacement fighters where they'd switch out the opponent and like, oh, now we've got like a mispriced fighter. It's not. It's just the line has gone that way so heavily, and I think DraftKings is now minus 115 Chiasson, minus 105 Bueno Silva. So it's continuing to move in the direction of Chiasson. We'll see what happens at weigh-ins. I don't know that I totally understand this dramatic of a line movement. And I'm a little bit worried about the fighters weighing in. I do think wasn't Myra Bueno Silva popped for some kind of performance enhancing thing that overturned her win against Holly Holm. So that could be a factor where it's like, she's not looking good. I don't know.
I mean, the thing is, John, what I've heard, I mean, remember, I'm not someone that breaks down the fights. I'm not some expert. I mean, I watch the fights. I'm probably better than a layperson, but I'm not Liam or Mike who breaks stuff down on the Ground and Pound podcast. Liam, who does their premium breakdown. But I mean, I've seen other people around the industry that I deem as, I respect their MMA backgrounds. They don't understand why the line, like it's not like Chiasson's bad. Like it's not like Chiasson's bad and Bueno Silva should be, she should be a minus 300 favorite. Just like they don't understand why the line movement is kind of either, because they're kind of handicapping the fight that Bueno Silva, I mean, should be a minus 150, minus 160 fit. Like that's how they view it. So even I've seen some people on Twitter that are like, I don't know what's going on, but like you said, is there something that we don't know?
Right. Yeah, it's not good, right? And just in terms of like DFS, yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of Macy Chase. I mean, it's a difficult situation to write up for content because 47% is a lot. But of the things that cause a fighter to be overowned, the thing that I'm most likely to go along with is win equity, right? So I don't like if we can get a fighter that's got a 50-50 shot or better of winning their fight at 7,400, I think I should take that. And I agree. And even if she wins the fight, it's not guaranteed that she's on the winning lineup. So, if it's 50-50, maybe she should be 40% owned. And so maybe I end up under the field on 47. I'll still probably rate her up because if I'm rostering a fighter at 40%, I should probably write that fighter up. So it's one of those weird situations where she's one of the fighters that I like the most. Also, I might be under the field depending on what the field rosters are at. But it's difficult because she scores fairly well. There's no reason to think she's going to be a low scoring fighter. And she even scores somewhat well in some of her losses. So if it is one of those cards where it's just, oh man, all the favorites are just cleaning up, and Chiasson does put up a 55-point loss, which is possible against Bueno Silva, then maybe she finds a winning lineup even in a loss. It's just the line movement is dramatic. It's something to keep an eye on. It's changing by the day, going heavily in the favor of Chiasson. So going to see what happens at weigh-ins. Going to see monitor the line movement leading up to the lock. It'll be interesting to see if it really flips strongly in favor of Chiasson. Then I don't know what's going on. Somebody should do an investigation. Yeah, that's the story with Chiasson. I'm not going to fight it if the fight still looks like it's going on heading into lock.
How about the other side? I mean, even as of now, Bueno Silva plus 185 inside the distance, plus 400 in the first round. I mean, Bueno Silva can finish people. I mean, assuming everything's okay with this fight. I mean, it's not like Bueno Silva's. This fight could end in the first round with Bueno Silva just submitting or knocking out Chiasson. Which will kill off a ton of lineups. So from a leverage perspective, I feel like I need to have some Bueno Silva. She may come in at 12% owned or something like that, because technically she's 600 overpriced now. But I go from your mind of thinking, right? You always look at those first, if you get a win in the first round, you're getting it, at minimum 90 points, but most of the time you're getting over 100. If the betting line says that 20% of the time Mayra Bueno Silva wins the first round, I'm assuming you're going to be over on her also.
We'll see. It depends. Yeah, it depends what her ownership comes in at. I'm seeing a little bit lower chances, but I'm seeing about 17% chance. Let me see the lines I've got for her for round one win. I'm seeing one 400 and one 550. So I'm saying about 17% chance of it.
Right, but it's still over. I mean, it's still probably going to be a little bit over her ownership.
Yeah, I mean, she should be rostered at least at her round one win odds. I'm wondering, is it an interesting cash game play, stack Bueno Silva and Chiasson, just in case, because everyone's gonna be playing Chiasson in cash. So if you play Bueno Silva, Bueno Silva, I think, put up 60 points in her last loss. That's an interesting roster construction I wouldn't have thought of. I think if she's gonna be 10% owned, I think you want to be over that. And potentially double it. It's just it makes me a little bit wary. I don't like when we see line movement this dramatically going against it, because the times when we've seen a line movement this strong, it generally doesn't bode well for the fighter that is is seeing the line move away from them. So yeah, I mean, on paper, Bueno Silva is a great leverage play, and if the fight's just going on as scheduled, I think you need to roster her whatever the implied probability of her round one win is, which is 17%, which would put me dramatically over the field if she is like 9 point something percent owned. But it doesn't give me a great feeling. I don't know that I'd be putting her in like a lot of my high dollar lineups, but it's an interesting leverage play. Odds don't always tell the whole story. Sometimes you do see like some line movement in favor of a fighter, and that fighter just goes out and loses. Sometimes there is. We've seen this with was it, I think, a Gilbert Burns fight last year, where there's just rumors of an injury, and who was it? Giga Chikaze, where Gilbert. I remember Gilbert Burns was the opponent, but yeah, there was talk that his opponent was injured and was limping around on one of his ankles, and Burns went out and lost, and the opponent was like, "Yeah, I injured my ankle right before the fight, still managed to win." But it caused some dramatic looking line movement, and it just. I mean, the story was true. Yeah, he had a sprained ankle, a few days before the fight or whatever. He still was able to go out and get the win. So the line movement and odds don't tell everything. Sometimes, that Bueno Silva could go out and get the win, but it makes me a little bit wary. I don't love the idea of like going all in on Bueno Silva, thinking because she's probably going to be a huge leverage point. I'm just not going to go all in.
Okay, you mentioned the Simone Oliveira fight as a fight that you want to target. Is there any other fights on the slate that you target more than the field?
I do think I'm a little bit more interested probably in Carlos Hernandez. It's like the second fight of the night, Soroya and Carlos Hernandez. I think I want to be over the field on Hernandez because I do think Soroya is going to see high ownership, and he should, because he does have like grappling. He could put up a high scoring early win. He could put up a high scoring decision win. I do have some interest in Hernandez because I heard multiple people say that they think Hernandez can win this fight. I believe it's Soroya's debut, so we do see things go awry sometimes in these guys' debuts. So that's definitely a fight I'm interested in targeting. Let's see, other fight. I think I'm going to be targeting the Joe Pyfer, Mark Andre Barrio fight. Barrio should put up a decent score in a win. He's one of those guys that like always looks more impressive than his DraftKings score. Just because he'll have these huge impact punches, but just counts as one significant strike. But that's definitely a fight I'm interested in targeting. I mean, there's no other fight that necessarily. I guess like the Brian Ortega.
That's what I thought. I thought you were going to say the Lopez Ortega fight because I think Lopez. I mean, Lopez at 8,400 can end up being the highest scoring fighter on the slate. He could also lose. So I mean, like that's like it's the Lopez Ortega fight is like minus 125 plus 105. And Ortega's plus 300 inside the distance, and I wouldn't be surprised if he won. I wouldn't be surprised if Diego Lopez wins in the first round. I think you got to pay attention to that fight, and maybe even the Dolidze Anthony Smith fight. I think Dolidze at 8,400. I mean, he could knock out Anthony Smith early. I mean, I take a look at this fight, and I mean, Anthony Smith beat Vitor Petrino last time out, but it was because of just an opportune guillotine when Petrino went for a takedown. Those are such like the low percentage types of things. I think Anthony Smith is just so hittable on the feet that like unless he gets an opportune thing like that, I'm not sure the line should be this close. So I'm not big in trusting Roman Dolidze, but I'm just trying to look for fighters in this mid range that could outscore Peyton Talbot, right? Like that could get 110 points, and you don't need to play a 9K fighter. So I'm looking at Lopez for the first round, especially in the first round. Dolidze, maybe Andre Feely. because he's minus 230 for 8,600 is pretty nice on this slate. But I just don't know if against Cub Swanson that this fight most likely probably goes the distance, right? I'm not saying that Cub Swanson's worth anything, but I'm not sure if Feely's the one to end it early. And then you got like Jillian Robertson against Michelle Waterson-Gomez, and I think Jillian Robertson has immense grappling upside. Then in a 3-round decision, she can score 100 points. That's why I look at this card and I go, there's a lot of combinations where, like Jillian Robinson puts up 120 points and Ray Cerrulla loses against Carlos Hernandez, but Carlos Hernandez only puts up 70 points. And then Pfeiffer puts up 120. Like, it feels like there's a lot of combinations where there's different worlds where different people put up 100 points each. And the combination of the 6 of them, there's just a lot more of them on this slate, I just think.
Yeah, it's an interesting card because I don't see any fighter with like a 30% chance or higher of getting a first round win, which is rare. Usually there's somebody in the like 35, 40% range. Sometimes we see these guys have a 50% chance, especially when we have these like fighters that have an 80, 90% chance of getting a win. Usually their chances of getting a first round win are like 60%, 50%. We don't have anything like that this time. So yeah, I agree. Like Jillian Robertson, I should have mentioned her. She's a fighter I'm interested in because she does have grappling upside. I'm probably like more interested in her than Andre Feely, who's got a better chance of winning, but may not put up that high scoring of a win. The Jalidzeh Anthony Smith fight is like a fight that we've seen in some other like points in this card where it's probably like if one of them gets an early finish, then you probably need to have them. If you don't, then you don't necessarily need to have that fight at all. But yeah, I'm interested in like the Ortega Lopez one is probably the one I'm most interested in because it's pretty guaranteed to have some grappling points. Diego Lopez has the famous 90-point win where he won in the first round without doing anything, right? Just got a submission, didn't get a takedown, didn't get a strike, just got the 90 points. But he is capable of also like getting I think his last one was like 120 DraftKings points. So he could put up some scoring. And so yeah, I think Ortega is going to be higher owned than we're showing. If not, I'm going to be rostering him at more than we're showing. And I'm interested. Like I'd rather have 80% of the Ortega Lopez fight than 80% of the main event. If that makes sense. I guess actually Charles Jourdain and John Silva is another fight we should talk about because I think I'm really interested in Silva. I think he can put up a high score. He was like a minus $1 million favorite against Weston Wilson in his last fight. But I think he could get a high score in multiple ways, right? Like he could get an early finish. He could get grappling points. But Charles Jourdain is actually slightly favored. And it's priced in the mid-range. So that's a fight that I'm interested in having a good percentage of.
I think the only fight we didn't mention at all is the fight that maybe I target the least, which is kind of weird because it's the direct mid-range fight between Ian Gary and Michael Page, 8,200, 8,000. It's just noticeable. Gary plus 300, plus 330 ITD lines. Two guys that mainly kickbox, like not many takedowns, not absurd amount of volume. In the instance that, it looks like a grand total of like 22% of the time this ends in the first round. Well, congratulations. But outside of that, it's hard to think that outside of a first round finish that either of these two guys put up that large of a score. And especially like when you target these types of fights, like I don't mind, like I never mind taking a shot on a guy that by eyesight you go, yeah, probably wins the fight, probably wins a decision, probably scores 80 points, right? Like we get sometimes those guys at like 9K that it's like, Yeah, I just don't see how he just scores 120 points in this fight. He's just not the type of Martin Boudet. I don't know how he scored. I don't know how he scored, but the numbers say that, the betting lines say that he's going to do it much more frequently than people may expect. That's much different than a mid-range fight where not only does either of these guys will win in the first round 12% of the time. I don't know which one it is. At least in the other scenarios, it's oh, I know that one guy will and one guy won't. So at least I'm taking up a roster spot. And if I'm playing 20 lineups, it's well, at least, I got 4 lineups with this guy, 4 lineups with that guy. It's if you don't get the right guy and then the fight busts, it's half your lineups are done. So it's if it was one of the two, then it's oh, maybe I take a shot of him, but both of them, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many lineups I'm going to play tomorrow, but if I was playing 5 lineups, I would just X out this fight. That's at least what I would do.
And even here, hearing Ian Gary talk about the fight, he's saying well, I think I can outlast him on cardio and get him in the 3rd round or something. Well, okay, that's probably a good fight strategy. So it's not he's a bad fighter for thinking that or saying it. But that's not what I'm interested in for my DFS lineups. I mean, this is one of those fights where, the difference between my incentives, playing DFS and the fighter's incentives, just trying, to win the fight, just don't align. So I think there's maybe an argument to be over the field on Michael Page and under the field on Ian Gary. Gary does have really good win equity for 8,200 because the lines moved, I think, in his direction. So I'm seeing him with about a 57% chance of winning the fight. The problem is, I think his last win was 50 something DraftKings points. So I don't, it was just under 60 DraftKings points. That's not great. So what are you getting even if you are buying into that win equity? I'd much rather take Macy Chiasson's win equity where she can get a couple takedowns and score some points rather than Ian Gary's, potential for getting a 55 point win. I think we could see higher ownership than 20% on Ian Gary, and then you would say, well, maybe you should have Michael Page as a leverage play. But I think Michael Page's win was even lower, 52 points. So I think it's a good fight. I like it a little bit better than the Martin Boudet and Arlovsky fight, but not by much. This one might be one where I just roster 15% Page, 15% Gary in lineups to kind of still have something to watch after the main event starts. Should one of them put up 120 point score, but it is when you think about how is one of these fighters going to put up a slate breaking score, it's, I don't know. Somebody slips on a banana peel and then, the guy, other fighter touches him and that's it. He's out.
Right. And so it's one of those eye pokes that don't get called, nut shots that don't get, and then the guy turns his back and then ends up getting knocked out because he thought that it was going to be a timeout and it wasn't, one of those types of things.
Yeah, the Estela Nunez was it Dudikova and Estela Nunez and Dudikova pushed her and Nunez fell over and dislocated her elbow. Well, that's a knockdown. That's a knockout. First round, 120 something point score just was very unexpected, right? Sometimes the way these things are scored is not what we're seeing with our eyes. So I think if you're multi-entering, it's going to be Saturday night. I want to watch the fights. I'm going to have some of both of these fighters for my 150 lineup build, so I have something to watch. But I don't want to be over the field on this fight because I also do think the names are somewhat noteworthy. So whatever people are not using projections and are maybe not thinking of DFS scoring, they might overown these fighters just based on the name value. But it's likely not going to be a very high scoring DFS fight.
Well, one thing that you will have later today for premium members, remember you can get a premium membership here at RotoGrinders. Click on the link in the description, get $40 off your first month. You'll have your takedowns article. We'll have the sim labs, the opto percentages later today or early tomorrow morning. Typically Dane runs those with the last ownership update. And your takedowns article with the underdogs. I'm going to guess, typically you put 4 in there. So I'm going to guess it's Ortega, Chiasson, Oliveira, Hernandez. I'm going to guess just based on today's show.
You probably got at least 3 of the 4. I haven't really decided yet. I was actually just thinking in my head. Who it'll be. That's probably at least three of the four. It is weird. I'll probably write up Chiasson just to discuss and like with faint praise though, right? Saying that like I might be under the field, but she warrants discussion if you're really just trying to read this article real fast to like put together some competitive lineups. But yes, it'll probably be Chiasson, Ortega, probably Carlos Hernandez, probably 2 out of Carlos Hernandez, John Silva, and Oliveira.
So yeah, so there you got a free preview of it. So check that out if you are a RotoGrinders premium member. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door, right? Get those thumbs. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live later today. Obviously, 5 o'clock Eastern, Grinders Live for MLB. But John, you'll be on Crunch Time tomorrow afternoon with Mike H3 Buddha, especially seeing, if anything changes after weigh-ins. If Myra Bueno Silva turns out to, comes out and, is missing an arm or, is coming out with a cast or something, or, there'll be something there to say why the line has moved so much. But you'll have
check the Discord server. She's talking about any injuries or whatever.
So that's tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, I believe, is on the schedule. So tune in then. And and tune back in next week. It's mostly MLB until NFL starts up. It's like it's MLB, and then MMA on Fridays. MLB, MMA on Fridays. So if you're not sick of MLB already, we got the All-Star break also coming up. So we got a little go out, touch grass, right? I know this WNBA stuff. There's always NASCAR or PGA or something like that. But it's quite possible to take a day off for DFS, but we don't take a day off here at RotoGrinders, right? Because I'm here Monday through Friday talking about all the things you're thinking about in daily fantasy props and pick'em on RotoGrinders today.